Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart, and it's all about the Empire War Wagon at the moment. Quite a few seem to be arriving on people's doorsteps, and mine arrived within 72 hours of ordering, which is pretty wild for a made to order. But that's not what this video is about, at least not directly.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems, and offer custom items to suit your club, your event, or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description. Now, I really didn't expect my War Wagon to arrive in 72 hours. In fact, I thought it was going to take an extremely long time. So I thought I needed an alternative solution to use as my War Wagon in the meantime, and also provide me a second miniature should I ever want to run two. I mentioned this in the Miniature Realms Discord. Go and join it, go and check it out. There's a link in the video description. And one of the awesome members there, Symphonium, suggested making one into a Zeppel. And if you don't know what that is, many moons ago, Games Workshop sold upgrade kits to go with your plastic steam tank in order to change it into different versions and different models. And one of those was the Von Zeppel, which basically gave you a platform on the top for all your crew of the War Wagon. So essentially, you have a War Wagon, but it's steam powered rather than horse powered. So I thought, I can do this. I like kit bashing. So I took my painted steam tank and cut the turret off the top, making quite a mess of it as I went. And I went about playing around with filling that hole, and I smoothed it out with a Dremel after working out that a 32mm base, I think, fitted in quite nicely. I thought I can tidy it up a little bit, glue it in, and that gives me a recessed area in which I can place an area for a magnet, so I can take the turret on and off and fit whatever new contraption, which I hadn't built at this stage, onto it. Got a circular magnet in there, a nice sort of self-adhesive one, and then worked one and glued it on the other side of the turret as well, so that I could fit them together. It's not the strongest of bonds. I could have used a rare earth magnet here, but it's quite a light piece of plastic, the top of the turret, and that's absolutely fine for using it in games. Needed to do a little bit of a tidy up, touching up the paintwork on both sides. So just going for the black here, just to touch up where the plastic was still showing, but when you've got the turret on, it doesn't show up at all. And it didn't take too long to touch up the gold trim where I made a mess. I painted it in black primer first, added the metallics back, and then just added a few oil washes and things to tidy it all up. And it looked pretty good, to be fair. And again, as soon as the turret is on there, you couldn't really see any of the area where I cut away. I should say, if you want to see how I painted the steam tank originally, there's a tutorial for that, and I'll pop a little link in now, and you could watch that, and then the rest of this should give you most of the information you need. At this stage, I headed to the bit spots, and one of my best go-tos for wooden planks and things is the Middle Earth range, and this is a Rohan house door. I've glued the two halves together, and it's about the right size to go on the top. Couple of bits from the porchway, and I'm picking this really partly for shape, but also because it's basically wooden, so there's lots of wood grain. This is a bit of the Goblin Scribe, also from the Hobbit range, which covers the door in the bottom, and then glued on the back was part of the Goblin King's throne, and then some of the cross pieces from the Rohan houses as well. Now this is quite brief. I've edited this together because originally this was going to be part of a bigger video around my whole construction of my nuln army, which is coming later on, so you'll have to bear with me where I'm not going into too much detail about which parts I chose, but basically using lots of these Rohan house kits, delving a little bit into the Lake Town houses as well, and just using all these wooden planks, building as I go. And then I had to start adding all of the Empire bits on as well, the things you find in the Manor kit, some of the standard state troop kits as well, so adding some spikes and some skulls on, adding some shields from the state troops kits as well, some of the little scrolls and things to start making it look Empire rather than Middle Earth, which would be a bit of a problem. I've covered those little slot windows at the side with those shields, magnetised in the bottom. and that's how it fits on. You can see there's a little bit that rests on the cannon there as well, which obviously you wouldn't be using in game, and that just gives it some support. And as you can see here, I built the crew using state troops and some extra bits as well. One guy's got the Hochland long rifle from an engineer. I made a blunderbuss because I'd use them all just by adding on a normal rifle. And we've got the repeater handgun anyway in the Pistoliers kit or the Outriders kit. This was the hardest. It's a couple of halberds to make that weird man catcher. The hook halberd is just a halberd with another spike on and extended the length. And the ball and chain here is taken from the flagellant sprue as well, so lots of little extra bits. There they are, all mocked up inside, and I'm pretty happy with that. Really easy, it's fun doing kit bashing with plastics, and we're ready for painting. So with the miniature prime black, I'm using some Model Air white through the airbrush here to give it a zenithal, and it's just a great way of painting most miniatures and definitely painting wooden areas. So I'm trying to make sure that a lot of that black stays in there in all those recesses, so they will provide some nice shadows as I glaze on over the top afterwards. I'm not too worried about going over the shields here. They're going to be repainted in black anyway, but I'm just trying to keep the direction mostly top down and a bit to the side, allowing the light to sort of focus on those top areas a bit more, and as I said, leave those recesses in. Then I'm moving on to a Trooper White here from Two Thin Coats onto my dry brushing palette, and I'm slapping it all over. So this is a la slap chop, as it's been called by some people. Well, I'm just really picking out the detail with this, and that really boosts that detail and boosts the shadow in return when I add those glaze layers on top. So this is my contrast wood method. It's using a mixture of browns usually and sort of ochre colours. And there's a colour missing here that if you've watched me use this on quite a few other videos, you may spot there. You can pause them on the screen, but it doesn't really matter which of the contrast colours you're using. What you want is a reddish brown, a more neutral brown, something ochre and something sort of bone coloured like that, just a bit of a mix. And the idea is you're just completely wet blending them. So I thin them all about 50% with water, apart from the skeleton horde, which is a little bit thinner anyway, not too much there. And I'm just wet blending them on the miniature, and it only really works when you've got all of this wood grain, so all that detail for it to run into. And when it dries, it mixes together. It just looks really great. And now what you see me pick up there and show off to the camera is the Militarum green. That's the missing ingredient I forgot to add at the beginning. Nearly always add a green in there, and that really adds to the effect, and it doesn't quite work as well, in my opinion, without it. We've got all that scroll work as well, so I've been using the skeleton horde while I'm at it. So I'm working my way around this little wooden basket contraption thing at the top and just mixing these sort of different browns and orangey browns and greens and things together, and it just blends in really, really nicely. But when it dries, you get this kind of dull, old, silvered, used wood look, which is what I'm after. I'm just really enjoying at the moment, and it's so quick to do, and the result is really, really nice. There's a few other little details, like some little coils of rope that I put in the middle, partly to hide where I'd carve something off the plastic, but also I think it looks good on the floor as if they'd have piles of rope there just because they needed it. There's these fabric areas that were part of the Goblin King's throne, but I've just painted them as if they had Hessian or something like that in there as well. So it all works. I'm just using the base for that from Skeleton Horde, and I'll go back and highlight that all a little bit later on. I'm also using some Cygor brown here just for these leatherish straps, or I'm going to say they're leather straps holding the wood together where it's been a little bit damaged at the back on campaign there. And a little bit of Dark Angels green contrast on the couple of bottles I've put in as well. They obviously like drunk firing. Once all that is fully dry, I head to Deck Tan, which is a lovely colour from Model Colour from Vallejo. And this is a super, super light dry brush. I really don't want to leave any streaks on it at all, almost a tickle all over the wood effect. You can go over the other areas as well. It just adds something to the edge. Then afterwards, I've gone back with a little bit of Cygor brown here as well, just to kind of go back over, nice and thin there, just tone down those highlights a little bit, glaze back over the top, but it just again makes that wood look a little bit more silvered. If it is a bit too bright, just adding a thin layer of some of your wooden colours over the top works fine to knock it back again. Sometimes just a thin coat of Skeleton Horde works really well. Two thin coats, Doom, Death Black, Death Reaper and Dungeon Stone Grey. Nice little triad from two thin coats. And just that's the black recipe. I've been using a lot of my nuln army, so I'm going to be using it on the base of the shields as well, which are going to be mostly black. So using the same colour on the flag as well, a nuln flag obviously, so we're going to go with a black base on it. And then when we get back to the shields and for highlighting the flag as well, that mid-tone and the highlight, for the shields I'm focusing towards the bottom, which is a method I picked up painting Horus Heresy tanks years ago, just making it lighter at the bottom rather than at the top. It's not technically always where the light would hit, but it looks quite pleasing, especially with these. The bottom of the shield seems to curve out a little bit, so I'm making them lighter down the bottom, a little thin edge highlight on the top as well, and it just adds a little bit of a subtle transition between the dark and the light on the shield. It is very much rinse and repeat here, going around all the little shields on the sides of this little wooden basket thing here, around the edges of the front. Same method really on the flag, so picking out those outward folds and making them lighter. I've got all three colours on my wet palette, so if anything's a little bit strong, I can mix and blend back between the two. Back to the skeleton horde, I'm just reinforcing the colour a little bit on some of those parchments where they weren't dark enough, because I was using thin skeleton horde before. I'm also using this on some of the skulls that are on those shields. Some of them I'll be painting a metallic gold or something like that, but some of them I also want to look like they've been painted in a realistic way as well, so this is a perfect base for a skull. Berserker Red and Sanguine Scarlet and Demon Red is the red combo, the red triad I have been using for my nuln army, and again you will see that on the painting tutorials that I've done for the army, so do check those out. And for some of these shields I want to do them as half red, half black, so I'm just painting in now a thin coat of that base Berserker Red, and then I'll go on and highlight up using the other two colours in the same method as I did for the black, so focusing towards the bottom to be a little bit lighter but still having a edge highlight all the way around with the top layer of the red. Also used a little bit of the red and some contrast black Legion just to paint in a little bit of text on the scroll work. And I say text, it's just squiggly lines to represent it at this scale. Some painters would definitely be able to paint actual words in there. That's not something I have the skills to do, but I still think it looks pretty cool. We have Iraqi sand from Vallejo model colour and ivory tusk from two thin coats. I'm just going to use that as the highlight for all of the skulls, so anything with the skeleton horde really, and also those areas of parchment. So using the Iraqi sand first, more of a yellow tone, thinned probably 50-50 on the wet palette, and just picking out those higher areas around the cheekbones, around the big domed sort of forehead of those skulls. And then when we get to the scroll work as well, I'm just focusing around the edges really. That I've already put the text on there. I don't want them super bright, so I'm just making them pop and stand out a little bit just by building it up at the edges, and then just a few touches of the ivory tusk at the end on both the skulls and those parchment areas just really makes it pop. For the gold, back to scale colour, or scale 75 for their metal and alchemy range, and this is necro gold and elven gold, so a desaturated necro gold as the base, and then the elven gold just to make it pop a little bit in the highlights. And anything on those shields now that I haven't painted in skull, I'm going back and painting in these golds. On the shields on the steam tank itself below, I've gone with a yellow. I decided to add a little bit of variation for this and gone with gold. Also with these little skulls here, they're obviously cast skulls rather than real ones. Going to keep the spikes as if they're steel, but the skulls themselves can be gold. For the steel areas, we have black metal from the same scale colour range, and then also some Game Air silver as well. Very simply, the steel on first, and while it's still a little bit wet, I just add a little bit of the Game Air silver to the top and wet blend them together, so it just got the light catching on the end of those spikes there. Then after that, decided to add a couple of decals to those plain shields. There's some nice ones in the new State Troops box, which I'm using here. I had to trim them down a little bit. I'm using Microset and Microsol. I'm not going to go through it in detail here. I do have a tutorial on the channel. I will try and remember to pop a little link in here now that tells you how to do it. And now, with all that fully dry, and I have sealed those decals in with a varnish as well, I'm using some oil wash here, and this is grease from Scale Colour. It's a ready mixed oil wash in place of a standard wash. So I'm focusing on the metals, but also a bit on the wood as well, allowing it to run into the recesses around the edges. And what happens with oil paints, they really run into the recesses better and don't pull too much on the flat surfaces, and even if they do, you can wipe them away afterwards, unlike a standard wash. And when they dry fairly matte and actually look like weathering at the same time. So I love the effect they give, and I use them an awful lot in my miniature painting, and my regular viewers and subscribers will hear me go on about them all the time. I will assume there are a few new people here that may have popped in to see this because it's all Wagon crazy at the moment, but they are definitely worth checking out if you haven't tried them before. They're definitely nothing to be scary of. Do you want to use an old brush though? Don't want to use any of your nice brushes because they will mess them up. Towards the end of the video, I'll show you how you can tidy up your oils as well using some thinners when I come back to the crew. But here I am gluing them to bases for painting, and with a little touch of super glue, using 1 foot to a little plastic base. And this is Death Reaper and Dungeon Stone Grey, but through the airbrush, very top down. And I'm trying to do a quick way of doing black, and that is covered in my Empire handgunner tutorial and a few others. So I will pop a link in for this because I'm going to go through this quite quickly here rather than a normal detail I would, because that would be a whole video in itself. But essentially I'm using a zenithal style effect using greys over a black prime as a quick way of highlighting black, and then rather than lots of edge highlighting, I recess shade as well, which is perfect for army painting. So this is Contrast Black Legion, which is what I'm using for that recess shading. And we've got these miniatures now with 2 layers of grey on, and there's lots of black in all the undercuts anyway because we use a zenithal kind of method. And if we take thin lines of this watery black and paint them into the recesses, into the little bits of detail, it's much quicker than edge highlighting at the end, and it really helps make it look like a nice highlighted black. This is Barbarian Brawn, Dwarven Skin and Elven Skin, lovely triad from Two Thin Coats as well. And I've not mentioned all the citadel conversions in this video, and I often do. And this is the same method again I used in that handgunner tutorial I'm using for the whole army. But if you want citadel conversions for these paints, if you check the Transatlantic Games website, they've got lovely charts on there, and they compare really well with citadel paints if you're a citadel user. But essentially I'm doing traditional layering here, so the dark tone, the mid tone, the light tone, decreasing each time. By the time I get to the highest level, I'm focusing on cheekbones, nose, forehead, that kind of thing, across the knuckles, just on the fingers, until we've got this nice 3 levels of highlighting. Now on to Shyish Purple and Vulpus Pink contrast paint on the wet palette, thin slightly, and I'm using the purplish colour to add into the recesses, so just paint away around the edges of the cuffs, around the top of the helmets, into the recesses of the eyes, that kind of thing, blend it out if I need to. And then the pinker colour I add to the bottom part of the face, to the tops of the hands, in between the fingers, and add some warmth there. Then after that I paint in the eyes and then just touch up with a top highlight of skin, and we're done. These are 2 triads that I'm using for the leather areas to give me 2 different sort of tones and recipes. So we have cuirass leather, boar hide and fur cloak, and then noble steed brown, dry brush brown and satyr brown. One gives you more of a light tan looking leather, another one slightly darker and richer with a reddish tone to it. And I mix and match it a little bit, working in triads. You don't have to buy them in triads in the way they're set up like those on Tooth and Coats, but working in triads can really help you when you're doing large army projects. You've got the 3 colours you need for your base, your mid-tone and your highlight. That's all you're going to need in most instances for army painting, and it just stops you wondering which one to use next and then finding out that the mix you've done matches too close. It means if you've got 2 browns next to each other that you want to stand out from each other, you've got 2 simple recipes. And I use another triad again for the wood, which is slightly different again, so they don't mix in, so it's easy to see what's wood, what's tan leather, what's more of a darker leather as well. And I'm just going around these guys here picking out different bits. So we've got boots, we've got leather belts, we've got straps holding their armour on. Remember, these are based on Empire State Troops. A couple of them have actually got metal chest armour as well, because they would have had halberds as part of their original kit. Some of them have little pouches and leather water bottles and bags as well. If you know these miniatures, you'll know they're quite busy with lots of little bits to colour in. Gizmo Fur, Manticore Oak and Cerberus Brown, and this is that triad I'm using for the wood for this army. Again, quite a light effect on the wood. Again, you could swap all of these around. You could use this as one of the light leathers if you wanted to, and switch them around. Again, I'm just providing you with examples, and again, whizzing through this at speed here. If you really want to know each layer and talking through all the techniques for each stage here, do go and watch that handgunner tutorial, because that is all about painting one single handgunner using all of the paints that I've talked about in this section of the video. But essentially, again, I'm building up between layers, getting smaller each time, focusing on the edge and where the light would hit most on some of these wooden areas, just to make it pop and stand out and show a bit of transition. Simplicity, I stuck with the same colours as well, be it a rifle stock, a gun stock, or one of the wooden handles on one of the more gruesome close combat weapons as well. Afterwards, I'm just using a little bit of skeleton horde straight out of the pot, just to tone down and glaze over any of the little scratches or marks and things that I put in as part of painting that look too bright, and also just close to where the hand is or where the end of something is, so it adds a little bit of shadow or shading in there. It just does a really nice effect. Back to that same red recipe that we've used on the shields, because it's the recipe for the army that I'm using, and there's some red areas to pick out on these as well. So there's feathers, I'm going with some black, some red to match the army colours. Again, it's building up through those three colours, so your base, your mid-tone and your highlight. Also lots of little red sashes and ties and things like that as well. Exactly the same method, exactly the same paints. I've even painted the odd entire sleeve in red like that, just for variation, especially when it's puffed like this. For all the metallics, I'm using decayed metal, black metal, and then game air silver. So very similar to what you saw earlier, but I'm using the decayed metal as the base, and I allow that to show through the other silvery colours a little bit. It just gives it more of a weathered, in-depth look. So anything that's metallic here, I'm giving it a base of this first. So that's all of the metal rifle parts, all of the metal parts on the close combat weapons, and any of the hilts on the sword blades, the dagger blades they've got on their belts, any of the little metal bands, and any of the armour that the crew are wearing as well. Then after that base layer is down, it's pretty much an all-over covering of the black metal, but it's quite a thin covering, and I'm deliberately leaving it sketchy so some of that brown shows through. And again, like I said, it just gives it that nice depth to the colour rather than just painting this on, and I really like the effect that it gives. If you haven't got a colour like this, something like the old tin bits colour would work quite well. In fact, Tooth and Coach do a tin O-bits paint, which is very similar to the old Games Workshop tin bits, so it's worth having a play around if you've not used that kind of method before, but I really like it. And then as we get to that top highlight, I'm using that Game Air Silver, and it's really smooth. It's a Vallejo Game Air paint, so it's designed for the airbrush, but you can blend it really nicely and just paint it on like this and just add the highlight where the light was, almost painting like I would do with a standard triad in another colour. And much like the areas on the little wooden basket, I'm using the oil wash again, the same one on all of the metallic areas, nowhere else on these miniatures, so keeping it to the metals, and it just blends those three layers of metallics together, so it adds a bit like a filter by sloshing it on, but I will tidy it up a little bit afterwards as well. Then this is AK fast drying thinner, and this is how you can tidy up your oil. So where they dry, and they can take a long time to dry, but once they're dry you can go back with, again, an old brush, a little bit of the clean thinners, dab it off on a bit of paper towel, and just take it off any flat areas you don't want it. And then this is the joy of the oil paints, you can clean it away. Make sure you leave it in the recesses, you don't want to take it all back off, otherwise it was just pointless what you did. But it's a lovely effect if you want to just brighten something up again. You don't need to go back and repaint it, you just take that oil away. A little blood for the blood god effect here, and I wanted to add something to the really gruesome weapons, but not like a 13-14-year-old would do and too thick. I'm thinning it with water and just sort of blending it out, and I want it to look like a little bit of residue rather than dripping with gore, because that's a little bit too much, in my opinion anyway. So a little bit here or there, dot it on first, wipe it off the brush, a little bit of water, and just sort of blend it out a little bit so there's just hints of it. And there we are, it's all done. Took me a little while to sort of get them in the position I like. They are glued in, but let's have a look at some proper pictures. I'm really glad I made this. It was loads of fun to do it. I guess if I knew my proper war wagon was going to turn up so quickly, I may not have done the project, which would have been a shame, because I've had a lot of fun doing it. It's really nice to have the ability to run 2 in a list if I want to as well, which I think will be fun. If I want to run as a steam tank as well, I'll have to buy another steam tank, but that was my plan anyway. This steam tank was an eBay rescue. I want to buy one with an engineer poking out the top, so this will then become an option to have 2 steam tanks or 1 steam tank and 2 war wagons, or vice versa. It'll give me some flexibility for my army in the future, and it was just loads of fun. It's a shame in many ways that I use Middle Earth parts, because this can't now become part of my armies on parade display, because I'm using parts from the Middle Earth game, which just isn't allowed now, which is a shame, because there aren't any fantasy or AOS kits that give you that kind of wood, so you'd have to make it out of balsa. But I still very, very happy with the way it's come out, so let me know what you think in the comments.
As always, thank you very much for watching the video. Hope you've enjoyed it, and maybe it's given you some ideas about things that you can do as an alternative to a standard war wagon. If you are still here, please do click like on the video, drop a comment below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And if you'd really like to support me, please do check out the links in the video description. I have a couple of affiliate links for Warlord Games and for Knott's Hobbies for some lovely dry brushes you'll have seen in the video, including sponging tool as well. They are super cool and very good value. Please do check out the show sponsor. The Counterattack bases have got a wide range of stuff that's perfect for Warhammer the Old World, not least dice, but also counters and markers and things like that as well. They really are great. If you'd like to support me more directly, my Patreon is the best way to do it, and it really helps me afford to keep making videos like this. And there are multiple tiers to suit different budgets and needs as well. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.